Hello and welcome. I'm here today with Scott Hartsman of Trion Worlds. One of the first people that ever introduced me to Trion, in fact.
Right on.
So I originally met him in Rift, and from there it's been history. So
that's true.
I have a few questions for you, Scott. First of all, can you tell the community who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Scott Hartsman. I am the CEO at Trion Worlds. I was previously the general manager of our Redwood Shores studio and the executive producer on Rift from when we first met. And then prior to that, I've been designing, programming, and producing online games as far back as the EverQuest era and the MUD era even before that. So, I mean, I'm a lifelong gamer, lifelong fan of online games in particular. I love any game that brings people closer together and has people really interacting and cooperating with each other just as a part of gameplay. That's really what gets me excited.
So can you give the viewers a little bit about what your day-to-day life is in your profession?
Oh, yeah. So right now, it's, you know, back in the day, let me explain in a contrast. So back in the day, I would get a lot of day-to-day enjoyment out of my job from coming into work. Something didn't exist when I got there, I would do some work, and now something existed that didn't, right? And that's really where the joy comes from, because you're creating things that are going to create feelings of fun and happiness and enjoyment in people playing your games. As a CEO, you don't quite get to do the same thing. But the moments that I love the most about my current job are when I get to make decisions that create a better environment for other people who are doing all the important hands-on work that people love, right? And it's a million little decisions. It's things like how many holidays do we get off, right? It's how do we make sure that we're being fair to everybody, that they're all getting, sane amounts of time away from work with their families, with their friends. How do we want to do game pitches, right? Internal to the company, how do we want to make sure that no matter how new you are or how junior you are, that your voice holds as much weight as anybody else, right? And it's all about little decisions like that. It's as we're setting policies for things like everything to reimbursals when bad things happen, trying to make sure we're as generous as possible. We really want to make people feel like we're right there with them. And in any internet-based anything, that's always hard because there's always contentious decisions to be made and always different takeaways. But we always try to be as good as we can to everybody all the time, and that's both of our players and our employees. So really, it's all, I get the same amount of satisfaction, but it's just from doing different things.
All right. Next up, I have a fun question.
Yeah.
Which technology are you most excited about that's currently coming to market?
Oh, man. I am still looking forward to the day that all of cloud computing becomes more applicable to what we do in online games at scale. And what I mean by that is, the rise of Amazon Web Services and Google Compute and all of these other services. They're not quite good enough yet to where they can do everything we need them to do for the types of games that we make. So a lot of the time when you run into capacity problems on MMOs, a lot of it has to do with the number of servers and the number of millions of dollars you chose to spend on the servers from the outset. And these are really hard decisions because if you overspend on those, that's a horrible critical failure. If you underspend on those, that's a horrible critical failure in the other direction. And there's no science to getting it perfectly right. And so the idea of having perfectly scalable, elastically scalable systems for our servers is something that once we have the ability to do that across all of our games, it's going to be the best experience for our users at something that is insanely affordable to the company and the best balance. So they're not there yet. We've been dipping our toe in the water and we've been using them where they make sense. But that's the kind of thing that could be like a quantum leap ahead in stability of game launches. Right. In making making them much more affordable and reasonably affordable to companies like ours.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and dive into some of the questions. So back in the early days of Trion, do you have any details about how Trion was founded? What it was like at the very beginning?
I know from stories. So I joined Trion for the first time about 4 years after it began. And the story, originally when the company was founded, it was very much around the idea of trying to be a combination of like a technology platform and an entertainment network, right? Like if the original name for the company was even Trion World Network, and so that was the founders were treating it like a broadcast network, like CNN, ABC, TWN, Trion World Network, and so they thought of it as like a network that would have many channels where each channel would be a game. And there were a lot of interesting principles that were set up at that time, and there were a lot of core technology choices that were really interesting. And there were a lot of challenges that they ran into in turning some of those principles into the kinds of things that will go ahead and create fun, launchable games that can succeed at scale. And so by the time I joined, they had taken that vision a real good distance. And then as they added even more folks who had more experience with even more different types of games, we were able to take that original vision and adapt it to something that could successfully launch MMOs, like we saw with Riv, which was vastly more successful for the company than even the company had hoped for. So yeah, it's something where it was like you took a blend of people from different backgrounds with their own different perspectives, and through a lot of contention and iteration, great things did result.
Very true. I think Rift was probably one of the smoothest game launches I have ever seen. Like literally, it's still today, bar none, the most smooth launch I've ever seen.
Right on. It's a lot of practice.
So here's a personal one.
Yeah.
Now that you're at the top of the food chain, do you ever miss the code?
Oh, constantly. Every single day. So I am, we use a lot of different Skype chats in the company. We all live in Skype, basically. We've got probably about 50 or 60 different chats. I still sit in the engineers chat, even though I haven't been an engineer in quite a lot of years. But I still do, and so it's always fun, just kind of being a part of the engineering culture, even if it's only by observation. I get sad when I realize how distant I've become from it, but that's okay. It's like more of a wistful sad, not like crying sad. A fond sad. There we go. But when we launched ArcheAge, I will admit that I took about a 3-month period because we had a lot. We got assaulted with people for ArcheAge's launch, vastly more than we had expected, and we had a lot of reporting that had to be written for our customer service group so they could do their jobs. Things like catching cheaters, catching hackers, and so I would go to work and do my day job for 8 or 9 hours a day. Then I would go home, and I actually was engineering again. I was writing reports for customer service and writing and doing support coding for them to try to take some of the load off of our reports team, who was just so vastly overloaded. And it was, while it's never fun writing reports to help catch cheaters, it was at least fun being able to express that part of your skill again. Yeah.
So now that Trion has gone from the little development studio that could to this giant titan that is now a publisher, what has been the biggest challenges of taking your games to market?
Thank you for the word titan. I don't know that I'd go that far, but I appreciate the kind word.
Pretty close.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the biggest thing that's a part of it is, and this might sound trite, but it's actually turned out to be very true, and that is communication. It's something that all of us need to get better at every day, including me. Where when you have so many people working on so many different things, people's natural tendency is to assume that everybody around them already knows all the stuff in their head, but people are so wrapped up in their own jobs, trying to get their own stuff done, trying to create their own great things, that you frequently have to have a conversation and repeat, restate things 6 or 7 times with people before it sticks. Not because anybody's dumb or bad, but just because everybody's so damn busy all the time, right? And so the constant communication and the constant staying in touch and maintaining an open environment is something that we actually have to concentrate on and actually work very hard at. Where when we had one company that was all working on one game, it was all the same mission, so people were much more likely to already have that mental overlap. But when you've got a larger group of people working on 6 games, now there has to be a lot more reminder and restatement of the things that matter. And so that's one of the things that is definitely one of the things that's been most interesting to work through is scaling.
Okay, so I understand that you're showing off a new title here.
Yes.
Atlas Reactor. It's currently in testing.
Yep.
Can you share us a little bit about that game and what players can expect when they play it?
Yeah, so with Atlas Reactor, you may recall that we're big fans of PAX, right? We announced the game to our players first at our party last year at PAX, and that was the first public mention of Atlas Reactor or a new game or anything, and it was already extremely highly playable, so we've tended to announce a lot later in the cycle than a lot of people might otherwise do that. And so Atlas Reactor for us, the general drive for that has been, we knew we wanted to try a competitive game, but we wanted to try a competitive game that was going to be very different from what a lot of was already out there. There's already lots of competitive shooters. There's already lots of competitive first person. There's already a lot of competitive MOBA, right? And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to try something that was going to stand out and really be unique. And so the team invented the idea of competitive simultaneous turns because we liked the idea of a competitive game where the whole strength and whether you win or lose is more on thinking and predicting and less about how fast you can click, right? It's, you have about 20 seconds to make every turn, and those 20 seconds go by shockingly fast because there's a lot of information to take in, and then you make the best decision you can. All of your teammates decide at the same 20-second period, and then you get to watch the turn play out, and then you repeat. And so we like the idea of a game that was built around shorter sessions than a typical, MMO experience, which still has lots of fans, myself included. Nobody loves sitting down to an MMO and playing for 8 hours straight more than me. But with Atlas Reactor, we were aiming for something more in like the 12 to 20 minute round time that you can then play for hours and hours and hours and hours. And that's really been the experience. And so it's been fun trying to learn how to explain that type of gameplay to people. And then the press tends to give us a lot of interesting comparisons. They use words like XCOM meets Dota was one of the comparisons we got. We also got XCOM meets League of Legends. We've also gotten turn-based for the Overwatch generation. It's like as people try to figure out how to describe it, they're kind of inventing some interesting comparisons. Oh, chess with guns. We've gotten that too. And so for us, the activity has been more around making sure that people just get hands-on time with the game. Because what we've found is that when people sit down and play it, even if they can't categorize it mentally, they just go, "Holy crap, this is fun." And so that's why we've been spending so much time at conventions this year. We went around and took laptops to journalists to be like, "Look, just try it. If you like it, write about it. If you don't, that's fine. No harm, no foul. But just try the game and see what you think." And universally, the reaction has been, "Okay, this is really unique and fun."
So this might bring a smile to your face. I introduced my mom to it.
Okay.
And she loves it.
Okay, that is fantastic.
So
I do love that. Who's
like, she was Pirates 101.
Yeah.
Toontown before that.
Right on.
She's playing Atlas Reactor now and loves it.
That is fantastic.
Purdy.
That is.
I figure there's got to be something there, and I'll be honest with you, I am like pitifully bad at it. Like literally, if anybody out there needs a win, they need to look up Faglada, and they got a guaranteed win. You are gonna smoke me because I am terrible at it.
It comes with practice. It really does. The interesting part about the game is that as the team continues adding more freelancers with more different types of skills, a lot of the time what I've found after initially being super terrible too, was that I would switch to a different freelancer and suddenly have a ton more success. Like, my initial success in this game all came from rolling a support role, where I typically don't play healers and I typically don't play female characters in games, but Aurora, the female, the first female support that was introduced, to me, I mean, the gameplay just really clicked. My win-loss ratio took off, my elo went up, and I just started having a ton of fun. And so I think a lot of it, I think we're up to 17 or 18 different freelancers in the game right now, and as they add more, they will, you're going to increase your chances of finding something that really clicks with you.
Right. So what else does Trion have lined up for 2016? I understand that you might have another expansion on the way.
We have 2016 is probably our biggest year in the history of Trion in terms of just the sheer number of things going on. So you're right. We've got Atlas Reactor, which is in beta right now. We just launched its free mode, where the free mode is play as long as you like for free on a free rotation of characters, and then you can just pay once to unlock all of them. We've got a brand new expansion for Rift, which we just announced, which I'm super excited about. I'm one of those players, I still play Rift. I dive back in for about 3 months at a crack about once a year, and I play hardcore, and we find that a lot of our players tend to do that, where there's a lot more surfing in and out, and so what we look for in a great expansion is something that's going to be really fun, and it's going to get people really excited about coming back in. And in our case, it's new advancements to the way items are upgraded, an entire new leveling range, an entire new continent to play on, and all of the things that people really love about getting back into games. We've got a brand new expansion for ArcheAge also. ArcheAge is doing a brand new expansion called Revelation, and it is also going to come with fresh start servers, and also has a bunch of new space and a bunch of new mechanics that we're expecting people to be really interested in. And then in Trove even, we just announced a couple of months ago that we are doing a partnership in China with a company called 360 Game, and we're working on the China version of Trove right now with them. And then we're also, in parallel with that, with another outside partner, working on the console version of Trove, which we expect to begin testing later this year also. So yeah, there's just a ton going on all at the same time.
All right, so Rift is a special spot in my heart, as you know.
Me too.
When I first met you, I asked you, will your game support a guild of 500?
Yep.
And do you remember what you told me? You told me that if I ever found a limit, to tell you, and you'd raise it.
Yep.
So, Rift, in my opinion, has been the hallmark of exactly what a guild system should be.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mainly because whether you're big or you're small, everything has a synergy about it, where you don't have to be a big guild to be a successful guild.
Right.
You can be a small guild and be just as successful as any big one.
Right.
And you did that through gating the amount of progression.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about what types of challenges? A lot of games are kind of moving away from allowing 100+ guilds in their game.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about why you feel that might be a thing, or if you feel that it's just their lack of knowledge of how to program a system that's balanced and fair for everybody?
Yeah, a lot of it goes to, there's tend to be two reasons. So number one is the weight of the technology. Number two tends to be what types of gameplay designs are you creating, and they're both different factors. I don't really think there's a lot of I don't want to knock anybody's skill, because I don't think it's really a matter of skill, but so let me start with the technology weight. Okay. So let's talk about how much information you need to manage and store per active guild member in a given game, right? And the network effects between those. If you have a game technology design that has a lot, tons of data that gets exponentially bigger with the number of people in a guild, you're kind of technologically limiting yourself to what you're going to be able to support. And so with Rift in particular, we very intentionally kept the per member weight relatively light, so we knew that we could largely increase the number and not really have to worry too much about what we were going to do. We weren't going to blow up any servers by taking the limit from 500 to 1,000, right? We knew we'd need to tweak the UI, we knew we'd need to do some other things, but we knew we had a good sense we'd be pretty safe. On the gameplay design side, it turns into a slightly different story. So Rift very intentionally does not have head-to-head guild competition, right? There are lots of games that do. If you are going to have head-to-head guild competition, you absolutely have to be very mindful of how big you're going to allow your guilds to get. If only because you don't want to be... You're forced to make cutoffs somewhere. So, for instance, if I have a game that's got head-to-head guild competition, and I allow a guild of, say, 1,000 people, but the average guild in our game has, say, 20 people, that 1,000-person guild, chances are they're going to win. And at the same time, if you do allow that, and you don't, and you apply a limit to a guild and say, well, okay, 1,000-person guild, our average guild size is only 20 people on our game. So we're only going to let 20 of your people participate against these other 20-person guilds. That's just going to make a very angry 1,000-person guild. And so there's a lot of balancing about what types of gameplay are you going to be creating. Right. And so with Rift in particular, yes, we have guild advancement with bonuses, and you're right, in order to do that, we could just smartly gate progression, right? And we could balance around, we could do some dynamic stuff that made it feel satisfying no matter what size you are. But there are other games where there's like, it's like Braveheart, right? If you've got 1,000 people riding down a hill and 30 people riding up the hill, 30 people are just going to get stopped.
But a lot of times you'll find that like guilds like Gaiscioch or say, Syndicate, they're a big group. Yes. You'll also see Alkalades. These guys a lot of times will run with public groups. Right. So like even if you did throttle them, they're still going to bring a crowd. That's true. I'm wondering if maybe the industry is starting to be a little biased towards bigger guilds, even though they're not really looking at the fact that like if I have 1,000 people in Gaiscioch, I might have 25 people online. I see. Yeah. Because we're not a community that's only playing from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Right. We're a 24-hour community spread out over 67 nations. Yep. And all of our players are basically handpicked by being the casual players in every game. Right. So they maybe play 2 to 4 hours a day. Yep. So if you take 2 to 4 hours a day across 1,000 people, you end up with 25 to 50 people online at any given time, which is about the size of most guilds. Right, absolutely. So I'm just kind of trying to, I'm actually doing a little bit of an investigative story, trying to find out what it is from a developer's mind that is a limiting factor of why they would put those blocks in place that punish the casual player. Right. Because as a casual player, you'll never find a community that accepts you if you only play 2 to 4 hours a day. That is true to an extent. I mean, I think that what you'd run into with a lot of developers is that you'd find a lot of people aren't used to thinking about it in terms like you just described, right? Because what you did, if you also think about the number of developers that exist globally, there are a lot of developers in other countries. The dynamic that you just described, it's obvious to people like you and me, right? Because those are the kinds of people that we play with, that we seek to play with. There's like entire other countries where that is just such a foreign concept, right? There's like, especially with us, as we've started talking with and working with other developers across Europe, across Eastern Europe, across Asia, where they just have entirely different cultural mindsets around how players typically behave. And so what you've described is, it's how I like playing games too. It really is. And that's one of the reasons that I was incredibly sympathetic to your cause. Because it's like I can envision myself being in that guild and going, okay, these are people that I want to help solve a problem for. And I think there's just a lot of people who might not be able to identify with that as readily as maybe I was. Because that's how I play too. Yeah. All right. So, serious question. Yes. Corgis. Yes. What's with the Corgis making cameos in all your games? Okay. This is something that's taken on a life of its own, and it surprised even me when it got started. So, this began its life on Rift, and one of our, like I had mentioned earlier, we use a lot of different Skype chats. And among those Skype chats every company has one. It's the general miscellaneous off-topic chat. And our off-topic chat tends to devolve into pictures of memes and pictures of cute animals, like the rest of the internet mostly. And so one of the recurring themes in that chat was Corgis. It turns out that we had a large number of Corgi fans in the company. Nobody actually owned one. We just had people who thought they were freaking adorable. And so one of our environment artists, she's actually a very famous Dota art creator now, Anuxi is her name, and she
took it upon herself to create an in-game pet, one of the companion pets of a Corgi. Just stayed after work for a few nights and created a Corgi pet and showed it off to all of the Corgi fans in the company, and they all just started squealing. And then there was calls for, oh my God, we need to put this in the game, we need to put this in the game. And so we put it in the game, and of course everybody fell in love with it. And then the Corgi adoptions in the company started happening, including me. And so then we started having more Corgis, real Corgis, owned by people. And mine's 3 years old now, and he's the greatest thing in the world, and I love him to death. And so then it just kind of took on a life of its own, where people, like even our outside developers that we worked with, we didn't ask them to put Corgis in their game, like with Devilian. They came to us and they just kind of assumed, okay, so we should put a Corgi in our game because it's a Trion game? And so we were like, sure, I guess. And so yeah, it's just like this thing that evolved and took on a life of its own, because it turns out we love dogs.
So eventually you're going to have a Corgi jumping over Saturn?
It could happen. It probably could happen.
Yeah, I have to say that in Devilian, the Corgi pad is my favorite.
That's awesome.
He's like a loot guy. He takes your loot on, and it's great.
That was entirely them. We didn't even ask. We didn't even have to ask. They just did it.
Awesome. So, honest question.
Yes.
When I came to you back in issue 2,
yes,
with these grand ideas about Gaiscioch Magazine turning into a thing,
yes,
and asking for an interview, you were the very first person that ever agreed to an interview for Gaiscioch Magazine. So, did you ever imagine that we'd be here today?
Absolutely.
And what we're doing?
Absolutely have faith. Because that's the thing is, you're talking to a person. I've been making games for over 25 years. I've only ever made online games that people can play with each other. And the reason for that is, the reason that I think they're so powerful is because there is nothing more powerful anywhere in the world than activities that bring people together. And everything about who you guys are and your community is all about bringing people together and giving people another home. And that is the most powerful force in the universe. So of course I had faith that you would still be here, and that you'd still be around, and that you'll probably be around forever. And what's probably going to happen is it's going to outlive both of us. Hopefully.
You got to find a successor,
That's it. You got time. You got a lot of time.
Sure hope so. And then I have one final question.
Yes.
Do you have any aspiring words for a future game developer out there that's looking to possibly break into the industry?
I absolutely do. So it has never been easier than it is today to download free tools and just become a developer. You're not a developer after you're hired to be a developer. You're not a developer after you're paid to be a developer. You're a developer after you've developed something, right? And so don't let anybody else define you. Define yourself. Go out and learn how to do it. There's so much learning material on the internet these days. There's free tools. Unity is practically nothing to learn on. Visual Studio is practically nothing to learn on. Unreal is practically nothing to learn on. There is no excuse to somebody who's really driven. If they really want to, they can go out and start building today. Don't put it off. Just do it. It's going to be frustrating. There will be moments that suck. It's not always joy, but the feeling of having built something is really amazing. And so I would encourage everybody to just try building.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Love talking with you, and I have an honorary Gaiscioch patch for you.
Thank you so much.
You've been a part of our family from the get-go, so.
I wish I could put it on this shirt right now, but that's okay. I will cherish this.
All right.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Really
Have a good
appreciate
one.
it.